The whiskey bottle shattered against the saloon wall 3 inches from Adelaide Langford's head, and she didn't even flinch anymore. She had learned not to in the 6 months since arriving in Superior, Arizona, a copper mining town carved into the rocky terrain where the Superstition Mountains cast long shadows across the desert floor. It was 1884, and the town still buzzed with tales of her father, Jack Langford, who had robbed 17 stagecoaches before a sheriff's bullet ended his career and his life 2 years prior. Adelaide had been 20 then, living in San Francisco with her aunt, unaware that her father's legacy would follow her like a curse wherever she went. "Get out of here, Langford." The miner who had thrown the bottle staggered toward her, his face red with drink and anger. "We don't want your kind in our town. Your daddy killed my friend on that stage route to Phoenix, shot him dead for a bag of silver coins." Adelaide gathered her basket of linens she had just picked up from Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, keeping her eyes down as she always did. At 22, she had grown used to the accusations, the sneers, the way mothers pulled their children away when she walked past. She had come to Superior, hoping the distance from California and her father's main territory would grant her some peace, but news traveled fast in the West, especially news of notorious outlaws. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly, the same words she had spoken 100 times before, "but I had nothing to do with my father's crimes. Blood is blood," another man spat from the corner. "Apple doesn't fall far from the tree." Adelaide pushed through the saloon doors into the harsh Arizona sunlight, the heat immediately pressing against her skin like a physical weight. The town square of Superior was busy with the afternoon shift change at the mines, men covered in copper dust streaming down from the hillsides. She kept her head down, walking quickly toward the small cabin she rented on the eastern edge of town, as far from everyone else as she could afford. She had nearly made it to safety when she heard the voice that haunted her nights. "Well, well, if it isn't the outlaw's daughter." Sheriff Marcus Donovan stood in her path, his badge glinting in the sun. He was a cruel man who had made it his personal mission to make Adelaide's life miserable since discovering her identity 3 months ago. He claimed it was justice for the lawman her father had evaded and occasionally wounded during his criminal career. "I'm just going home, Sheriff," Adelaide said, trying to step around him. He moved to block her. "I've been thinking, maybe you're not just living on what your father stole. Maybe you're planning to follow in his footsteps. Maybe I should search your place, see what I find. I work honest jobs, Sheriff. I do laundry, mending, cleaning, you know this. Do I?" His smile was ugly. "Or maybe you're just waiting for the right moment to show your true colors." "Leave her alone, Donovan." The voice came from behind Adelaide, deep and rumbling like distant thunder across the mountains. She turned to see a man she had never encountered before, though she had heard whispers about him in town. They called him the Mountain Man, and looking at him now, she understood why. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that strained against his buckskin shirt. His arms were thick with muscle, visible where his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. Long dark hair fell past his shoulders, and a beard covered the lower half of his face, but his eyes were what caught her attention. They were a striking pale blue, like ice, and they were fixed on the sheriff with unmistakable challenge. "This isn't your concern, Wyatt," Donovan said, but Adelaide noticed he had taken a step back. "I'm just doing my job. Your job is keeping the peace," the Mountain Man said, moving to stand beside Adelaide. Up close, he was even more imposing, all hard muscle and coiled strength. "Not harassing women who haven't broken any laws. Her father, she isn't her father." The words were simple but spoken with such absolute conviction that they seemed to hang in the air. "Now move along, Sheriff. Unless you want to explain to the mayor why you're causing trouble instead of dealing with those claim jumpers up in the hills." Donovan's face flushed red, but after a long moment he turned and stalked away, muttering curses under his breath. Adelaide stood frozen, uncertain what to do or say. No one had defended her since she arrived in Superior. No one had even spoken kindly to her. "Thank you," she finally managed, looking up at the Mountain Man. His face was weathered from years in the sun and wind, with lines round his eyes that suggested he was perhaps 30 or 31. "You didn't have to do that." "Name's Wyatt Bradford," he said, and his voice was gentler now, though still deep. "And yes, I did." Man like Donovan needs to be reminded that badge doesn't give him the right to bully folks. I'm Adelaide Langford. She watched his face carefully for the inevitable change in expression, the hardening of features, the pulling away. But it didn't come as his eyes remained steady on hers. I know who you are, he said simply. Doesn't change that what he was doing was wrong. You know about my father. It wasn't a question. I know you're not him. Wyatt shifted the rifle he carried on his back. Been watching you around town these past weeks. You keep to yourself, work hard, don't cause trouble. That's all that matters. Adelaide felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen just slightly. Most people don't see it that way. Most people are fools. A slight smile touched his lips. You heading home? I'll walk with you. Make sure Donovan doesn't circle back around. She wanted to refuse, to maintain the distance she had carefully constructed between herself and everyone in Superior, but the truth was she was tired. Tired of being afraid, tired of walking alone, tired of carrying her father's sins like stones in her pockets. So she simply nodded, and they began walking together through the dusty streets. You live up in the mountains? She asked, partly to fill the silence, partly because she was genuinely curious about this man who had appeared like some protective spirit. Have a cabin about 5 miles north, up in the high country, Wyatt said. Come into town once a week or so for supplies. See what news there is. I trap mostly, some hunting, sell the furs and meat to the merchants for here. Sounds lonely, peaceful, he corrected. Though I suppose that's just another word for the same thing sometimes. He glanced down at her, and Adelaide was struck again by those pale blue eyes. What brought you to Superior? Town isn't exactly welcoming, even for folks without your particular burden. I thought maybe in a mining town, people would be too busy with their own concerns to care about an outlaw's daughter, Adelaide said. I was wrong, but by the time I realized it, I didn't have enough money saved to move on, so I'm stuck here at least for now. They had reached her cabin, a small structure that listed slightly to one side but kept out the rain and the worst of the heat. It sat alone on a patch of scrub grass, with nothing but desert stretching beyond it toward the mountains. Adelaide had grown to love the isolation, even as it emphasized her loneliness. Thank you again, she said, turning to face Wyatt, for what you did back there. I meant what I said, Wyatt replied. You're not your father. Anyone with eyes can see that. He hesitated, then added, if you need anything, my cabin is due north. Follow the creek bed up into the high country. You'll see smoke from my chimney on cold evenings. I doubt the town would approve of me associating with you, Adelaide said, though something in her chest fluttered at the thought of seeing him again. Good thing I don't give a damn what the town approves of. Wyatt tipped his head to her, a gesture that was almost courtly despite his rough appearance. Take care, Miss Langford. She watched him walk back toward town, his long stride eating up the distance, and for the first time in months, Adelaide felt something other than resignation or fear. She felt hope, fragile as a bird's egg, but hope nonetheless. The next week passed slowly. Adelaide continued her work, moving from house to house, collecting laundry, mending tears in miners' shirts, scrubbing floors for the few families wealthy enough to afford help. She endured the whispers and the pointed looks, the way conversation stopped when she entered a room. But now, when the weight of it grew too heavy, she found herself thinking about Wyatt Bradford's words. She isn't her father. Such a simple statement, but no one else had ever said it. On Friday afternoon, Adelaide was returning from the general store with her meager groceries when she saw a crowd gathered in the town square. Her instinct was to avoid it, to skirt around the edges and hurry home, but something made her pause. She could hear raised voices, angry and afraid. Another stage robbed, a man was saying. That's 3 in the past month. They hit the Phoenix route again, got away with the payroll for the mine. Adelaide's blood went cold. She pushed closer, needing to hear more, dreading what she would discover. Same methods as before, someone else said. Quick, efficient, no one hurt but everyone terrified. They're saying it's just like the old days. Just like Jack Langford's days, a woman added. Her voice sharp with accusation. Adelaide felt eyes turning toward her, felt the weight of suspicion like a physical force. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, but what could she say, that she had nothing to do with it? They would never believe her. Maybe the daughter learned from the father. Sheriff Donovan's voice cut through the crowd. He was looking directly at her, his expression triumphant. Maybe all that innocent act is just that, an act. That's ridiculous, Adelaide said, forcing her voice to remain steady even as panic clawed at her throat. I've been here in town every day. I have witnesses. Do you? Donovan stepped closer. You live alone, out on the edge of town. Who's to say you're not sneaking out at night, meeting up with accomplices? Maybe your father had partners we never caught. My father worked alone. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows what we were told, Donovan countered. Maybe the truth is different. Maybe you're the proof of that. The crowd was muttering now, the sound growing uglier by the second. Adelaide saw hands reaching for weapons, saw faces twisted with anger and fear. Her father had stolen from these people, had made them afraid to travel their own roads, and now they saw a chance for revenge. Back away from her. Wyatt Bradford emerged from the crowd like a force of nature, all muscle and barely contained power. He positioned himself between Adelaide and the sheriff, and even Donovan seemed to shrink slightly in his presence. I said, back away. Wyatt's voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. Miss Langford has been in town during all 3 robberies. I've seen her myself, working honest jobs. She has nothing to do with this. And how would you know? Donovan challenged, though he made no move to come closer. You're barely in town yourself. I know because I've made it my business to know, Wyatt said flatly. Now, unless you have actual evidence, actual proof that she's involved, you'll leave her alone. That goes for all of you. He turned slightly, his pale blue eyes scanning the crowd, and Adelaide saw men look away, saw the mob mentality begin to fracture under the weight of his presence. There was something about Wyatt Bradford that commanded respect, even fear. Perhaps it was his size, the obvious strength in his frame, or perhaps it was something deeper, something in the way he carried himself that spoke of a man who had faced down danger and survived. Come on, Wyatt said quietly to Adelaide, taking her arm gently. Let's get you home. They walked together through the parting crowd, and Adelaide was acutely aware of every eye on them, every whispered word. But with Wyatt beside her, massive and protective, she felt safer than she had in months. When they reached her cabin, Adelaide found her hands were shaking as she tried to unlock the door. Wyatt reached out and steadied her fingers, his own hands large and calloused but surprisingly gentle. Thank you, she whispered, again. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. Nothing good, Wyatt said grimly. Mob mentality is a dangerous thing, especially in times of fear. He paused, then added, I don't think it's safe for you to stay here alone, not with feelings running this high. I don't have anywhere else to go, Adelaide said, hating how defeated she sounded. I barely have enough money to keep this place. I certainly can't afford to move. Wyatt was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. Then he said, Come stay at my cabin, just until things calm down. You'll be safe there. Adelaide's first instinct was to refuse. It wouldn't be proper. A young unmarried woman staying with a man, even one as honorable as Wyatt seemed to be. But propriety seemed like a small concern when weighed against her safety. I don't want to impose, she said carefully. And people will talk. People are already talking, Wyatt pointed out. At least at my cabin you won't have to hear it. And there's room. I can sleep in the loft. You can have the main room. It's not fancy, but it's warm and dry, and most importantly, it's 5 miles from anyone who wishes you harm. Adelaide looked at him, this mountain man who had twice now stepped in to protect her when he had no reason to do so. His face was earnest, his eyes sincere. She thought about staying here, alone, waiting for the next angry knock on her door, the next accusation, the next bottle thrown at her head. All right, she said softly, but just until things settle down and I'll earn my keep. I can cook, clean, do mending. Fair enough, Wyatt said, and something in his expression lightened. Pack what you need. We should leave before it gets dark. Adelaide moved quickly, gathering her few possessions into a worn carpet bag. She owned so little after years of running from her father's reputation. A few changes of clothes, some personal items, a book of poetry her mother had given her before she died. It all fit easily into one bag, a sad testament to how small her life had become. They left Superior as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Wyatt led the way along a narrow trail that followed a dry creek bed, and Adelaide struggled to keep pace with his long strides. He noticed and slowed, matching his pace to hers without comment. The landscape changed as they climbed higher into the mountains. The sparse desert vegetation gave way to juniper and pine, and the air grew cooler, fresher. Adelaide could hear the sound of running water, surprising in this arid land. Creek runs year-round up here, Wyatt explained, fed by snowmelt from the higher peaks. That's why I built my cabin where I did. Good water, good hunting, far enough from town that I can have some peace. His cabin appeared as they crested a ridge, and Adelaide stopped, surprised by what she saw. She had expected something crude, barely more than a shack, but Wyatt's home was solid and well built. It was constructed of thick logs with a stone chimney and real glass windows. A covered porch wrapped around the front, and she could see a small barn and corral off to one side. "You built all this yourself?" she asked, amazed. "Over the past 3 years," Wyatt said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. "Figured if I was going to live up here, I might as well do it right." Inside was just as impressive. The main room was spacious, with a large fireplace, a sturdy table and chairs, and shelves lined with books. A ladder led up to a loft space, and Adelaide could see a proper bed frame up there. The whole place was clean and organized, not at all what she had expected from a man living alone in the mountains. "You can have the bed," Wyatt said, gesturing to the loft. "I'll make a bedroll down here by the fire." "No," Adelaide protested. "This is your home. I won't take your bed. I can sleep down here." "We'll discuss it later," Wyatt said diplomatically. "For now, you must be hungry. I've got venison stew from yesterday. Just needs warming up." As Wyatt moved to stoke the fire and prepare their meal, Adelaide found herself watching him. There was a grace to his movements despite his size, an economy of motion that spoke of years of self-sufficiency. His muscles flexed under his shirt as he worked, and Adelaide felt her face grow warm as she realized she was staring. She forced herself to look away, to focus on unpacking her small bag and settling in, but she remained acutely aware of him, of his presence filling the cabin, of the way she felt safer than she had in years. They ate in companionable silence, the stew rich and flavorful. Adelaide couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a full meal without anxiety churning in her stomach, without watching for hostile eyes and listening for hostile words. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly, the question bursting out before she could stop it. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why risk making yourself a target by defending an outlaw's daughter?" Wyatt set down his spoon, considering his words carefully. "My father was a drunk," he said finally. "Mean drunk, the worst kind. Spent my childhood dodging his fists, watching him destroy everything and everyone around him. When I was 16, he got into a fight over a card game and killed a man. They hanged him for it." Adelaide's breath caught. "I'm sorry. Point is," Wyatt continued, "I spent years after that being judged for what he did. People assumed I'd turn out the same way, violent and worthless. Didn't matter that I'd never raised a hand in anger, never touched a drop of alcohol. To them, I was my father's son, and that was all they needed to know." "What changed?" Adelaide asked softly. "I left," Wyatt said simply. "Came west. Started over. Built a life where I could be judged on my own merits, not his sins." He met her eyes across the table. "When I saw what they were doing to you in Superior, I saw myself 10 years ago. And I figured if no one was going to stand up for you, maybe I should be the one to do it." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes, the first she had allowed herself in months. "I've been running for 2 years, she whispered. "Every town, it's the same. Someone recognizes the name, the story spreads, and suddenly I'm not Adelaide Langford, laundress and seamstress. I'm Jack Langford's daughter, thief and probable criminal. I'm so tired of running." "Then stop," Wyatt said. "Stay here, stay in Superior. Don't let them drive you away." "How can I stay when they hate me? When they blame me for crimes I didn't commit, by refusing to accept their judgment, by living your life, doing your work, proving every single day that you're exactly who you are and not who they want you to be." Wyatt leaned forward, his expression intense. "I know it's hard. God knows I know. But running just proves them right in their own minds. It makes them think you have something to hide. And what if more stages get robbed?" Adelaide challenged. "What if whoever is doing this keeps using my father's methods? They'll never believe I'm innocent." "Then we'll find out who is really responsible," Wyatt said firmly. "We'll prove your innocence beyond any doubt." Adelaide wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that things could be different. but years of disappointment had taught her to be cautious with hope. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "Really, you barely know me." Wyatt was quiet for a long moment, his pale blue eyes searching her face. "Because when I look at you," he said finally, "I don't see Jack Langford's daughter. I see a woman who deserves better than what she's gotten. I see someone strong enough to keep going when most people would have given up. I see someone worth fighting for." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Adelaide felt her heart begin to beat faster, felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire, crackling in the hearth. "I barely know you either," she said softly, "but I feel safer with you than I have with anyone in years." "Good," Wyatt said, and his rare smile transformed his rugged face. "Because I meant what I said. You can stay here as long as you need, and tomorrow we'll start figuring out who's really behind these robberies." That night, Adelaide slept in the loft in Wyatt's bed, which smelled of pine and leather and something indefinably masculine. Below, she could hear the soft sounds of Wyatt moving around, banking the fire, settling into his bedroll, and for the first time since her father's death, Adelaide slept without nightmares. She woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon, sunlight streaming through the window above the bed. For a moment she was disoriented, uncertain where she was, and then memory returned. She was in Wyatt Bradford's cabin, in his bed, and he was downstairs making breakfast. Adelaide dressed quickly and climbed down the ladder to find Wyatt at the stove, cooking with the same efficient grace he brought to everything. He glanced up as she appeared, and his smile was warm. "Morning," he said. "Hope you're hungry. Mountain air tends to increase appetite." "I am." "Actually," Adelaide said, surprised to realize it was true. "Can I help with anything?" "Just sit," Wyatt said, gesturing to the table. "You're a guest. I thought we agreed I'd earn my keep." Adelaide reminded him. "You can start tomorrow," Wyatt said. "Today you rest and recover. You've been through a lot." They ate together, the conversation flowing more easily than Adelaide would have expected. Wyatt told her about his life in the mountains, the animals he trapped, the rare visitors who made their way up to his cabin. Adelaide found herself relaxing, laughing at his stories, feeling more like herself than she had in months. After breakfast, Wyatt announced his intention to ride back to Superior to ask questions about the stage robberies. "I'm coming with you," Adelaide said immediately. "I don't think that's a good idea," Wyatt said carefully. "People are still stirred up." "Which is exactly why I need to be there," Adelaide insisted. "If I hide away up here, it just makes me look guilty. Besides, I might be able to help. I know more about my father's methods than anyone. If someone is copying him, I might notice details others would miss." Wyatt looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he nodded. "All right, but you stay close to me, understand? I don't trust Donovan not to try something." They rode back to Superior on Wyatt's horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper. Adelaide sat behind Wyatt, her arm around his waist, acutely aware of the solid warmth of him, the muscles of his back pressed against her chest. She tried to focus on the scenery, the trail, anything but the way her heart was racing. Superior was busy with Saturday morning commerce when they arrived. Adelaide felt eyes following them as they rode down the main street, heard the whispers starting up again. But with Wyatt beside her, massive and protective, she found she could bear it. They dismounted outside the sheriff's office, and Wyatt helped Adelaide down with a hand on her waist that sent unexpected warmth through her. She caught herself again, reminding herself that he was just being helpful, that she shouldn't read anything more into it. Sheriff Donovan was not pleased to see them. "What do you want, Bradford?" "Information about the robberies," Wyatt said bluntly. "Details. Where they happened, when, how many robbers, what they took. Why should I tell you anything?" Donovan challenged. "Because if you don't, I'll go to the mayor and explain how you're more interested in harassing innocent women than actually solving crimes." Wyatt said flatly. "Your choice." Donovan's face reddened, but after a moment he pulled out a file. "Fine. First robbery was 4 weeks ago, Phoenix route, evening. 3 masked men stopped the stage at Dead Man's Canyon. They knew the schedule, knew there would be a payroll, got away with $2,000. "3 men?" Adelaide interjected. "My father always worked alone. Maybe he had partners we didn't know about," Donovan said. "Or maybe you're lying." "She's not lying," Wyatt said, his voice hard. "Jack Langford's methods are well documented. He always worked alone. What about the other robberies? Donovan grudgingly provided more details. The second robbery had been 3 weeks ago, same route but different time of day. 2 masked men that time. The third robbery, just 2 days ago, had involved 4 men. Different number of people each time, Adelaide said thoughtfully. My father would never have done that. He had a system, a routine. He stuck to it because it worked. This is someone else, someone who knows about him but isn't actually copying him accurately. Or someone trying to throw us off the trail, Donovan said. Did any of the victims notice anything specific? Wyatt asked. Anything unusual about the robbers? Donovan shuffled through his papers. Stage driver from the first robbery said one of them had an accent. British, maybe, or educated Eastern. Adelaide's head snapped up. My father never had partners with accents. Everyone he knew was local. That doesn't prove anything, Donovan said, but he looked less certain now. They left the sheriff's office with more questions than answers. Wyatt suggested they talk to the stage company directly, and Adelaide agreed. The manager, a harried man named Frank Cooper, was more helpful than Donovan had been. It's damned peculiar, Cooper said, spreading maps across his desk. The robberies are happening in different locations each time, but they all have something in common. They're isolated spots where a stage would have to slow down. Whoever is planning these knows the routes intimately. Who would have that kind of knowledge? Wyatt asked. My drivers, obviously. The regular passengers who travel frequently. Anyone who's been paying attention to the schedules. Cooper paused, then added, There's been a new fellow hanging around the depot lately. Asks a lot of questions about routes and timing. Says he's thinking of starting a freight business, but something about him doesn't sit right with me. What's his name? Adelaide asked. Calls himself James Morton. British fellow, well-dressed, very smooth. Staying at the Grand Hotel. Adelaide and Wyatt exchanged glances. The British accent matched what the stage driver had reported. Thank you, Wyatt said. You've been very helpful. They found James Morton in the hotel restaurant having lunch. He was exactly as Cooper had described. Well-dressed, polished, with an accent that marked him as educated in Eastern or European. He looked up as they approached, his eyes flickering with something Adelaide couldn't quite identify when he saw her. Miss Langford, he said smoothly. I've heard so much about you. Have you? Adelaide said coolly. From whom? Oh, people talk in a small town like this, Morton said. Please sit. Perhaps we can help each other. Wyatt remained standing, positioning himself slightly in front of Adelaide. Help each other how? Morton smiled. I'm a businessman, Mr. Bradford. I make it my business to know things. And what I know is that these stage robberies are very convenient for someone like me. They're driving down property values, making people nervous about staying in Superior. Soon claims and businesses will be available for very reasonable prices. You're planning to buy up the town, Adelaide said, understanding dawning. Smart girl, Morton said. Your father's reputation certainly didn't extend to intelligence, but I see you're different. He leaned back in his chair. Here's what I'm thinking. The robberies continue for a few more weeks. People get scared enough that they start selling. I buy everything up for pennies on the dollar. Then the robberies mysteriously stop, and I own half of Superior. You're admitting to organizing the robberies, Wyatt said, his voice dangerous. I'm not admitting to anything that could be proven in court, Morton corrected. I'm simply explaining a theory, a hypothetical situation. He smiled at Adelaide. And if anyone were to interfere with this hypothetical situation, well, it would be very easy to make sure the blame fell on Jack Langford's daughter. After all, everyone already believes she's involved. Adelaide felt anger flare in her chest, hot and fierce. You're threatening me. I'm simply stating facts, Morton said. You have no proof of anything. I've been very careful about that. And if you go to the sheriff with wild accusations, who do you think he'll believe? The respectable businessman or the outlaw's daughter? Wyatt's hand moved toward the gun at his hip, but Adelaide caught his arm. Don't, she said quietly. He's not worth it. Morton laughed. Wise advice. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have appointments to keep. Properties to evaluate. You understand. Outside the hotel, Wyatt was furious. That son of a I know, Adelaide said. But he's right, we have no proof. It's his word against ours, and no one will believe me. Then we'll get proof, Wyatt said firmly. We'll catch him in the act. How? We don't know when the next robbery will happen. We'll figure it out, Wyatt said. Cooper said the stages are being hit at their most vulnerable points. If we can anticipate where Morton will strike next, we can be there waiting. They spent the rest of the day with Frank Cooper studying maps and schedules. The stage company had 3 main routes: Phoenix to the south, Silver City to the east, and Tucson to the southwest. The first robbery had been on the Phoenix route, the second on the Silver City route, the third back to Phoenix. If there's a pattern, it's not obvious, Cooper said. But the next big payroll shipment is scheduled for Tuesday, Silver City route. That would be my guess for the next target. Then that's where we'll be, Wyatt said. They rode back to the cabin as evening was falling, the sky turning purple and gold above the mountains. Adelaide was quiet, processing everything they had learned. She had spent 2 years running from her father's reputation, and now someone was actively using it to frame her. The injustice of it burned in her chest. "Thank you," she said as they reached the cabin, "for believing me, for helping me." "You don't need to thank me," Wyatt said, helping her dismount. His hands lingered on her waist, and Adelaide found herself not wanting him to let go. "I told you, you're worth fighting for." That night, Adelaide insisted on cooking dinner to earn her keep as promised. She made biscuits and beans with salt pork, simple fare but filling. Wyatt ate with obvious appreciation, complimenting her cooking in a way that made her blush. After dinner, they sat by the fire, and Wyatt asked her about her life before Superior. Adelaide found herself telling him things she had never told anyone. About growing up with an absent father, about learning he was an outlaw when she was 12, about the shame and confusion that had colored her adolescence. About her mother's death when Adelaide was 18, and the bitter discovery 2 years later that her father had been killed in a shootout with lawmen. "I never really knew him," she said quietly, staring into the flames. "He'd disappear for months at a time, then show up with money and gifts and promises he'd never keep. My mother loved him anyway, made excuses for him. But I could never forgive him for the life he chose, for what it did to her. And now you're paying for his choices," Wyatt said. "Everyone wants me to be him," Adelaide said. "They expect me to be a criminal, a liar, someone without morals or scruples. Sometimes I wonder if it would be easier to just become what they think I am." "Don't," Wyatt said fiercely. "Don't let them take that from you. You're Adelaide Langford, not Jack Langford. You're good and honest and hard-working. Don't let anyone, not Morton or Donovan or anyone else, make you forget that." Adelaide looked at him, at the firelight playing across his strong features, at the conviction in his pale blue eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. This man, this mountain man who barely knew her, believed in her more than anyone ever had. He had risked his own reputation, his own safety to defend her, and looking at him now, she realized with sudden clarity that her feelings for him went far beyond gratitude. "Wyatt," she said softly, and something in her tone made him go very still. "Why are you really doing all this? It can't just be because you see yourself in me." He was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the crackling of the fire. Then he said, "When I first saw you in town, before all this started, you were walking past the church on a Sunday morning. You were wearing a blue dress, and the sun was in your hair, and you looked so damn alone it made my chest hurt. And I thought, there's a woman who deserves better than what life has given her." Adelaide's breath caught. That was weeks ago. "I know," Wyatt said. "I've been watching you since then. Not in a strange way," he added quickly. "Just noticing you. The way you hold your head high even when people whisper. The way you're kind to everyone even though they're cruel to you. The way you keep going when most people would have given up." He met her eyes. "And somewhere along the way, I stopped just noticing and started caring. Started wanting to know you, to protect you, to make you smile." Adelaide's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I didn't want to. I told myself it was just gratitude, that I was confusing rescue with romance. But it's more than that. You make me feel safe, yes, but also seen. Like I'm a person, not just a burden or a problem to be solved." Wyatt reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with one large, calloused hand. "You're the furthest thing from a burden," he said roughly. "You're brave and strong and beautiful, and every time you smile at me, I feel like I've won something precious." "Wyatt," Adelaide breathed, and then he was kissing her, his lips warm and gentle against hers. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to grip his broad shoulders, feeling the strength of him, the solidness. He tasted like coffee and smoke, and when he deepened the kiss, Adelaide felt heat flood through her body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day I met you," he admitted. "I wish you had done it sooner," Adelaide said, and was rewarded with his rare, transformative smile. They stayed by the fire for hours, talking and kissing and learning each other. Wyatt told her about his life in the mountains, about the peace he had found in solitude. Adelaide told him about her dreams of someday having a real home, a place where she belonged and was wanted, and with each word, each touch, each kiss, the bond between them grew stronger. When they finally retired for the night, Adelaide to the loft and Wyatt to his bedroll by the fire, everything had changed. They were no longer just the mountain man and the outlaw's daughter. They were Wyatt and Adelaide, two people who had found in each other something worth fighting for. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Wyatt taught Adelaide to shoot, setting up targets behind the cabin and patiently correcting her stance, her grip, her aim. She proved to be a natural, her shots growing more accurate with each attempt. "Your father may have been an outlaw," Wyatt said approvingly after she hit 3 targets in a row, "but you've got his eye for precision. The difference is you're using it for the right reasons." They also planned their strategy for Tuesday. The Silver City stage would be passing through Red Rock Canyon in the early afternoon, a narrow passage where it would have to slow down. If Morton planned to strike, that would be the ideal location. Wyatt and Adelaide would position themselves above the canyon, hidden among the rocks, and wait. "If we see anything suspicious, we observe and then report to the marshal in Silver City," Wyatt said firmly. "We don't try to be heroes. We just get the evidence we need to clear your name and put Morton away." Adelaide agreed, though part of her wanted to confront Morton directly, to make him pay for using her father's legacy to frame her. But she trusted Wyatt's judgment, trusted his experience and his desire to keep her safe. On Monday evening, they rode down to Superior to stock up on supplies for their stakeout. The town was tense, another robbery having everyone on edge. Adelaide kept close to Wyatt, drawing strength from his presence. They were leaving the general store when Sheriff Donovan appeared, his expression ugly. "Heard you've been asking questions about the robberies," he said to Wyatt, "poking your nose where it doesn't belong." "Just trying to help solve a crime," Wyatt said evenly. "Thought that was what you were supposed to be doing." "I am doing my job," Donovan snapped. "And part of that job is keeping track of suspicious characters, like outlaws' daughters who suddenly take up with mountain men." "Watch your mouth," Wyatt said, his voice going cold and dangerous. "Or what? You'll do something we'll both regret?" Donovan's hand moved toward his gun. "I've been looking for an excuse to bring you down a peg, Bradford. Don't give me one." The tension was thick enough to cut, and Adelaide could see other townspeople stopping to watch. This was exactly what they didn't need, a confrontation that would only make things worse. "Wyatt," she said quietly, touching his arm, "let's just go." For a moment she thought he wouldn't listen. His jaw was clenched, his body coiled with barely restrained violence, but then he took a breath and nodded. "You're right," he said. "He's not worth it." They turned to leave, but Donovan wasn't finished. Running away, just like her daddy used to. "Guess that's one thing they have in common." Wyatt stopped, turned, and when he spoke his voice was soft and all the more menacing for it. "Adelaide is nothing like her father," he said. "She's honest and hard-working and decent, which is more than I can say for a badge-wearing bully who gets his power from frightening women. You want to come after someone, Donovan, come after me, but leave her out of it." He didn't wait for a response, just took Adelaide's arm and guided her toward where Copper was tied. They rode out of town in silence, but Adelaide could feel the fury radiating from Wyatt. "I'm sorry," she said, when they were far enough away that no one could overhear. "I keep causing you problems." "You're not causing me anything," Wyatt said. "Donovan is a coward and a fool, and he's been looking for a reason to come after me for years. This isn't about you." "It feels like everything is about me lately," Adelaide said. "About my father, about who I am, about what people think I've done." Wyatt pulled Copper to a stop and turned in the saddle to look at her. "Listen to me," he said. "Tomorrow we're going to catch Morton and his men. We're going to prove your innocence. And then you're going to hold your head high and walk through Superior like you own it, because you have nothing to be ashamed of. You hear me? Adelaide nodded, throat tight with emotion. What did I do to deserve you? You were yourself, Wyatt said simply. That's all you've ever needed to do. They rode back to the cabin as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of red and gold. That night, they sat on the porch together, watching the stars emerge one by one. Wyatt had his arm around Adelaide's shoulders, and she leaned into his strength, his warmth. After this is over, he said quietly, what will you do? I don't know, Adelaide admitted. I suppose I'll stay in Superior if they'll let me. Keep doing laundry and mending. It's not much of a life, but it's honest work. You could stay here, Wyatt said. With me if you wanted. Adelaide's heart skipped. She pulled back to look at him, searching his face in the starlight. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm saying that these past days with you have been the best I can remember, Wyatt said. I'm saying that I wake up happy because I know I'll see you. I'm saying that when I think about the future, you're in it. He took her hand, his large one engulfing her small one. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I also know what I feel, and I feel like you're the person I've been waiting for my whole life. Adelaide felt tears sting her eyes, but they were happy tears. I feel the same way, she whispered. I never thought I'd find someone who could see past my father's sins, someone who could just see me. But you do, Wyatt. You see me, and you don't look away. Never, Wyatt promised. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and Adelaide kissed him back with all the emotion flooding through her. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. So is that a yes? Wyatt asked. You'll stay with me after this is over? Yes, Adelaide said. Yes, I'll stay, for as long as you'll have me. Forever then, Wyatt said and kissed her again. They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside, wrapped in each other's arms, planning a future that had seemed impossible just days before. And when they finally went to bed, Adelaide in the loft and Wyatt by the fire, both slept with smiles on their faces. Tuesday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for a stagecoach robbery if you were inclined toward such things. Wyatt and Adelaide were up before sunrise, preparing for their long day of surveillance. They packed food, water, blankets, and their rifles, then set out for Red Rock Canyon. The ride took 2 hours, following narrow trails through increasingly rugged terrain. Red Rock Canyon was well named, its walls a deep rust color that glowed in the morning sun. The stage road ran through the canyon floor, while the canyon walls rose steeply on either side, full of cracks and crevices perfect for hiding. Wyatt found them a position about halfway along the canyon, high enough to have a good view but concealed behind a jumble of boulders. They settled in to wait, and Adelaide was grateful for the blankets as the morning wore on and the sun climbed higher. How do you know they'll come? He asked quietly. I don't, Wyatt admitted. But Cooper was right about this being the next logical target, and Morton strikes me as a logical man. If he's going to hit another stage, it'll be this one. They waited in silence. The only sounds the wind whistling through the rocks and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Adelaide found herself studying Wyatt's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. He was in his element out here, alert and focused, every inch the capable mountain man. Around noon, they heard it, the distant rattle of a stagecoach approaching. Adelaide's heart began to pound. Wyatt touched her arm, a gentle reminder to stay calm and quiet. The stage came into view, moving at a good clip despite the narrow confines of the canyon. Adelaide could see the driver and a guard riding shotgun, both looking alert. For a moment, she thought nothing was going to happen, that they had wasted their time. Then 4 masked men on horseback emerged from a side canyon, blocking the road ahead. The stage driver pulled hard on the reins, bringing the horses to a stamping, nervous halt. Nobody move. One of the masked men shouted, and Adelaide recognized the educated British accent. Morton, this doesn't have to get violent. Just hand over the strongbox. Stay here, Wyatt whispered to Adelaide. I'm going to circle around, see if I can get a better angle for identification. Be careful, Adelaide whispered back, gripping his hand briefly before he slipped away, moving with surprising silence for such a large man. Below, the robbery was proceeding quickly and efficiently. The guard reluctantly climbed down and unloaded the strongbox, while the passengers, 3 men and a woman, were ordered out of the stage with their hands up. Adelaide watched carefully, trying to memorize every detail that might help identify the robbers later. One of the robbers moved differently from the others, with a slight limp. Another had distinctive silver conchos on his saddle. These were the kinds of details her father had always been careful to disguise or change, but Morton's men were either less experienced or less cautious. A shot rang out, and Adelaide's heart stopped. Below, she could see confusion. The stage guard had gone for a hidden gun, and one of the robbers had fired. The guard went down, clutching his shoulder, and the woman passenger screamed. "Idiot!" Morton's voice was sharp with fury. "I said no violence. He drew on me," the shooter protested. "Let's just get out of here," another robber said nervously, "before someone else shows up." They grabbed the strongbox and galloped away, leaving the stage driver trying to help the wounded guard while the passengers huddled together in fear. Adelaide started to rise, wanting to help, but Wyatt reappeared beside her. "Wait," he said quietly. "We need to make sure they're really gone, and we need to follow them to see where they go. But that man is hurt. The driver can handle it. They're less than an hour from Silver City. But if we lose Morton now, we might not get another chance." Adelaide knew he was right, but it felt wrong to leave without helping. Still, she stayed put as Wyatt watched the robbers disappear up a side canyon, marking their direction carefully. Once the stage had resumed its journey, limping along with the wounded guard inside and the woman passenger driving, Wyatt and Adelaide climbed down from their hiding spot and followed the robbers' trail. It led higher into the mountains, away from any traveled roads. "They're heading for the old mining camps," Wyatt said, "abandoned claims up in the high country. Smart. No one goes up there anymore." They followed carefully, staying far enough back that they wouldn't be spotted but close enough to keep the trail fresh. The sun was sinking toward the western horizon when they finally spotted smoke rising from a canyon ahead. Wyatt dismounted and handed Adelaide Copper's reins. "Stay here with the horse," he said. "I'm going to get close enough to confirm it's them." "I'm coming with you," Adelaide said firmly. "Adelaide, we're in this together," she said. "I'm not staying behind while you take all the risk." Wyatt looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he nodded. "Stay close and stay quiet." They crept forward on foot, moving from rock to rock with practiced care. Adelaide was impressed by how quietly Wyatt moved despite his size, barely disturbing a pebble. She tried to emulate him, placing her feet carefully, controlling her breathing. They reached a vantage point overlooking a small canyon where the remnants of an old mining operation were visible. A collapsed shaft entrance, a few rotting buildings, and a working campfire. Around the fire sat 4 men, their masks now removed. James Morton was unmistakable, his refined features and expensive clothes setting him apart from his rougher companions. Adelaide could see the strongbox from the robbery sitting near the fire, still closed. "We need to split it up and get out of here," one of the men was saying. "That guard getting shot was bad business. They'll be looking harder now." "Relax," Morton said smoothly. "They're looking for Jack Langford's daughter, remember? As long as we keep using his methods, she takes the blame." "What if she has an alibi?" another man asked. "She won't," Morton said confidently. "Bradford might vouch for her, but who'll believe him? He's just some hermit with no credibility. And even if they do believe him, there's no evidence connecting us to any of this. We've been careful." "I still don't like it," the first man grumbled. "Feels like too many things could go wrong." "Then you're welcome to walk away from your share," Morton said coldly. "Otherwise, shut up and do your job. 2 more robberies and we'll have driven enough people out of Superior that I can buy up half the town. Then we disappear, and I make 10 times what we've stolen in mining claims alone." Adelaide had heard enough. She started to pull back, but her foot dislodged a small rock. It clattered down the slope, the sound impossibly loud in the evening quiet. Below, all 4 men jumped to their feet, reaching for weapons. "Someone's up there," one of them shouted. "Run!" Wyatt grabbed Adelaide's hand, and they took off at a sprint back toward where Copper waited. Behind them, she could hear shouting, the sound of men scrambling up the slope. They reached the horse, and Wyatt practically threw Adelaide into the saddle before swinging up behind her. He kicked Copper into a gallop, and the horse responded immediately, racing down the trail they had followed earlier. Shots rang out behind them, bullets whining off rocks. Adelaide bent low over Copper's neck, feeling Wyatt's arm around her waist, holding her secure. The horse flew through the gathering darkness, sure-footed despite the treacherous terrain. More shots, closer now. Adelaide heard Wyatt grunt and felt him jerk behind her. "Wyatt!" she cried out, terrified. "Keep going!" he shouted. "I'm fine!" But Adelaide could feel warmth spreading against her back, could feel Wyatt's grip weakening. He'd been hit. "Hold on," she yelled, taking the reins herself and urging Copper to go faster. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit were fading, but Adelaide didn't slow down. She pushed the horse hard, putting as much distance as possible between them and Morton's men. Only when they were well clear, when she could no longer hear any pursuit, did she slow Copper to a walk and turn to check on Wyatt. His face was pale, his shirt dark with blood on his left side. "How bad is it?" she asked, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "Bullet went through," Wyatt said through gritted teeth. "Hurts like hell, but nothing vital hit. We need to get you to a doctor." "No doctors in Superior I'd trust," Wyatt said. "Get us back to the cabin. I have supplies there. You can patch me up." "Wyatt, you've been shot, Adelaide." His voice was firm despite his pain. "I trust you. Get us home." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist on proper medical care, but she also understood his reluctance to return to Superior, where Sheriff Donovan would be more likely to arrest them than help them. So she turned Copper toward home and rode as quickly as she dared with Wyatt injured behind her. It took over an hour to reach the cabin, and by the time they arrived, Wyatt was barely conscious. Adelaide helped him dismount, nearly collapsing under his weight, and half carried, half dragged him inside. She got him onto his bedroll by the fire, then quickly built up the flames to provide light. "Tell me what to do," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Cabinet by the stove." Wyatt managed. Whiskey, clean cloth, needle and thread. Boil the needle first. Adelaide moved quickly, gathering supplies with shaking hands. She had never done this before, had never dealt with anything more serious than minor cuts and scrapes. But Wyatt needed her, and she would not let him down. She helped him out of his shirt, revealing a muscular torso marked with old scars. The bullet wound was high on his left side, just below his ribs. He'd been right that it had gone through, the exit wound visible on his back. Both were bleeding steadily, but not gushing, which Adelaide hoped was a good sign. "Clean it first," Wyatt instructed, his voice strained. "Then sew it closed. I'd do it myself, but I can't reach the back wound properly." Adelaide did as instructed, using whiskey to clean both wounds while Wyatt bit down on a leather strap to muffle his groans. Then she threaded the needle with hands that trembled only slightly and began to sew. It was horrible work. The needle had to pierce flesh, and Adelaide could feel every stitch, could see Wyatt's muscles tensing with pain. But she forced herself to continue, to make the stitches small and neat just as she would on fabric. When she finished the front wound, she moved to the back, which was even harder to reach. "You're doing great," Wyatt said, though his voice was weak, almost done. Adelaide tied off the final stitch and sat back, her hands shaking. "Now what?" "Bandage it tight," Wyatt said. "Then let me rest. I'll be fine." Adelaide wrapped clean cloth around his torso, binding the wound securely. Then she helped him drink some water, followed by a healthy dose of whiskey for the pain. Within minutes he was asleep, his breathing steady despite the blood he had lost. Adelaide sat beside him through the night, keeping the fire burning, checking his bandages, wiping sweat from his brow when fever set in around midnight. She prayed as she had never prayed before, begging God or fate or anyone who might be listening not to take this man from her. Not now, not when she had just found him. By morning, Wyatt's fever had broken and his color was better. Adelaide, exhausted beyond measure, finally allowed herself to doze off beside him, her hand clasped in his. She woke to find Wyatt watching her, his pale blue eyes clear despite the pain he must be feeling. "Hey," he said softly, "you saved my life last night." "You saved mine first," Adelaide said, tears spilling over. "When you stepped between me and that mob, when you believed in me, when you showed me I was worth fighting for." "Always," Wyatt said. "Adelaide, I love you. I know it's soon. I know we barely know each other, but I love you, and I need you to know that in case—" "Don't," Adelaide said fiercely. "Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. We're both going to be fine. And I love you too, Wyatt Bradford. I love you so much it scares me." He smiled, that rare, transformative smile. "Nothing to be scared of. We've got this. What do we do now?" Adelaide asked. "Morton knows we were watching. He'll come after us." "Not right away," Wyatt said. "He'll want to lie low, let things settle down. But you're right that we need to act fast." He tried to sit up and winced. "We need to get to the marshal in Silver City, tell him everything we know." "You're in no condition to ride," Adelaide protested. "Then you'll have to go without me," Wyatt said. "Adelaide, this is our chance to clear your name, to put Morton away. We can't waste it because I got shot. I'm not leaving you alone and injured with Morton's men possibly looking for us." They argued about it for most of the morning, neither willing to give ground. Finally, Adelaide hit on a compromise. "What if we both go, but we take it slow? You ride, I'll lead Copper, we'll stop as often as you need. It's only about 15 miles to Silver City. We can make it if we're careful." Wyatt looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he nodded. "All right, but we leave now, before I get any weaker." They prepared carefully Adelaide packing supplies and helping Wyatt into a fresh shirt. He was pale and clearly in pain, but he could sit upright and even managed to mount Copper with Adelaide's help. The ride to Silver City was agonizing. They had to stop frequently for Wyatt to rest, and Adelaide could see the effort it took for him to stay conscious. But he insisted they keep going, and Adelaide trusted his judgment even as she worried. They reached Silver City just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. The town was larger than Superior, bustling with commerce and activity. Adelaide guided them straight to the marshal's office, where a grizzled lawman with a silver star looked up in surprise as they entered. "Marshal Connolly?" Adelaide asked, remembering the name from Frank Cooper's description. "We need your help." She told the story quickly and clearly, detailing everything they had seen and heard. Wyatt added details when he could, though Adelaide could see he was fading. Marshal Connolly listened with growing attention, especially when Adelaide described Morton's confession about framing her for the robberies. "That's a serious accusation," he said when she finished. "You got any proof beyond your word?" "The wounded guard from today's robbery can confirm 4 men were involved, one with a British accent," Wyatt said. "And if you check James Morton's background, I bet you'll find he's got a history of these kinds of schemes. Men like him don't start with something this elaborate." "We also saw where they're camped," Adelaide added. "If you move fast, they might still be there. And if we're right about Morton using these robberies to drive down property values so he can buy up Superior, you should be able to prove it through land office records." Marshal Connolly studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll put together a posse, head up to this mining camp you described. But I want you two to stay here where you're safe. No arguments," he added when Adelaide started to protest. "You've done your part, let me do mine." He arranged for them to stay at a boarding house while he organized his men. A doctor was summoned to check Wyatt's wound, and the old man nodded approvingly at Adelaide's stitching. "You did fine work, young lady," he said. "Keep it clean and dry, make sure he rests, and he should heal up just fine. Though I'd like to know what kind of trouble you two have been getting into." "The kind that ends with justice being served," Wyatt said firmly. "I hope." The doctor left them alone in the small room, and Adelaide finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Wyatt was going to be okay. They had reported everything to the marshal. Now they just had to wait and trust that the law would do its job. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in days, Adelaide found she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment when Wyatt had been shot, the way her world had seemed to stop. She had only just found him, only just allowed herself to hope for a future. The thought of losing him was unbearable. A soft knock came at her door, and when she opened it, Wyatt was there, leaning heavily against the doorframe. "You should be resting," she scolded, even as she ushered him inside. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Kept thinking about you over here alone." "I'm fine," Adelaide said, but even she could hear the lie in her voice. Wyatt sat on the edge of her bed, and Adelaide sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I was terrified today," she admitted. "When you got shot, I thought I was going to lose you." "I'm tougher than I look," Wyatt said with a slight smile. "Takes more than a bullet to keep me down." "Promise me," Adelaide said fiercely. taking his hand. Promise me you won't do anything that stupid again. I can't lose you, Wyatt. I can't. I promise to do my best to stay alive, Wyatt said. But Adelaide, life out here is dangerous. There are no guarantees. All we can do is hold on to each other and face whatever comes together. Together, Adelaide repeated. I like the sound of that. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being close, drawing comfort from each other's presence. Finally, Wyatt said, when this is all over, when your name is cleared and Morton is behind bars, will you marry me? Adelaide's breath caught. Are you proposing? I don't have a ring, Wyatt said, and this isn't exactly romantic. Me all shot up and you exhausted from worrying. But yes, I'm proposing. I want you to be my wife, Adelaide. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a life with you, a real life, full of all the things you've been denied because of your father's choices. Yes, Adelaide said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, of course I'll marry you. Wyatt kissed her then, gentle and sweet, and Adelaide kissed him back, pouring all her love and relief and hope into that kiss. When they broke apart, both were smiling through their tears. I love you, Adelaide Langford, soon-to-be Bradford, Wyatt said. I love you too, Adelaide replied, more than I ever thought possible. Wyatt stayed with her that night, holding her close as they both finally slept, safe and together, and dreaming of their future. Marshal Connolly returned 2 days later with news that made Adelaide's heart soar. He had found Morton and his men at the mining camp exactly where Wyatt and Adelaide had described. The confrontation had been brief and violent, with one of Morton's men killed and another wounded before they surrendered. Morton himself had tried to flee but had been captured after a short chase. He's singing like a bird now, Connolly said with satisfaction, trying to make deals, claiming he was coerced, all the usual nonsense. But we found the stolen money, we have 3 witnesses who identified him, and we found his notebooks detailing the whole scheme, including how he planned to frame you for the robberies. So I'm clear? Adelaide asked, hardly daring to believe it. Completely clear, Connolly confirmed. I've already sent word to Sheriff Donovan in Superior, along with a strongly worded suggestion that he owes you an apology. Morton will hang for the murder of that stage guard, and his accomplices are looking at long prison sentences. Adelaide felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten what freedom felt like. She looked at Wyatt, saw her own joy and relief reflected in his eyes. Thank you, Marshal, Wyatt said, shaking the lawman's hand. You've given Adelaide her life back. You two did the hard work, Connolly said. I just finished it. Though I have to say, that was some brave and foolish detective work you did. Getting that close to armed outlaws could have ended badly. It nearly did, Adelaide said, glancing at Wyatt's bandaged side. Well, you both came through it, Connolly said, and now you can go home and get on with your lives. Though if I were you, Miss Langford, I might consider changing that name. Fresh start and all. Already planning on it, Adelaide said, smiling up at Wyatt. Just as soon as we can arrange a wedding. Connolly grinned. Congratulations to you both. You've earned your happiness. They stayed in Silver City 1 more week while Wyatt continued to heal. The local newspaper ran the full story of Morton's capture and Adelaide's innocence, and copies were distributed throughout the territory. By the time they were ready to return to Superior, Adelaide's name had been completely cleared. The ride back to Superior was slow but peaceful. Wyatt was healing well, his natural strength and robust constitution serving him well. They talked as they rode, making plans for their future, discussing where they would live and what they would do. I'd like to stay at the cabin, Adelaide said, if that's all right with you. I know it's remote, but I've come to love the peace in the mountains. It's your home now, Wyatt said, for as long as you want it to be, though we might want to add on a room or 2 eventually for children. Adelaide blushed but couldn't help smiling. How many children are you planning on? As many as God sees fit to bless us with, Wyatt said. I grew up alone with a terrible father. I want our children to have siblings, to have a real family full of love and laughter. That sounds perfect, Adelaide said softly. They reached Superior in the afternoon, and Adelaide was nervous about the reception they would receive. But as they rode down the main street, people stopped and stared, and then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house owner, approached them with a tentative smile. "Miss Langford," she said, "I read the article from Silver City. I want to apologize for how I treated you. I should have given you the benefit of the doubt." "Thank you," Adelaide said, surprised and touched. "That means a lot." Others approached after that, offering similar apologies, congratulating her on clearing her name. Even some of those who had been cruelest seemed genuinely remorseful. Adelaide accepted their apologies with grace, though she knew she would never forget how quickly they had turned on her. Sheriff Donovan was conspicuously absent, and Adelaide learned later that he had left town shortly after receiving Marshal Connolly's message. Apparently, facing the woman he had harassed now that she was proven innocent was too much for his pride to bear. A new sheriff was being appointed, and Adelaide hoped he would be a fairer man. They were preparing to leave town when Frank Cooper, the stage company manager, approached them. "Miss Langford, Mr. Bradford," he said, "I wanted to thank you personally for what you did. Those robberies were costing my company dearly, not to mention the danger to my passengers and employees. If there's anything I can do for you, anything at all, you just name it." "Actually," Adelaide said, an idea forming, "there might be something. I've been doing laundry and mending to support myself, but I'd like to do something more. Do you need someone to manage the ticket office here in Superior? Keep track of schedules, help with correspondence, that sort of thing?" Cooper's face lit up. "That would be perfect. My current man is getting on in years and wants to retire. The job is yours if you want it, decent pay and regular hours." "I want it," Adelaide said firmly. This would give her independence, a way to contribute to their household that didn't require the backbreaking labor of laundry work. "Thank you, Mr. Cooper." "Thank you," Cooper said. "When can you start?" "Give me 2 weeks," Adelaide said, glancing at Wyatt. "I have a wedding to plan first." They were married on a crisp autumn morning 3 weeks later. The ceremony took place at the church in Superior, with Marshal Connolly riding over from Silver City to give Adelaide away. Mrs. Henderson and several other townspeople attended, along with Frank Cooper and some of the miners who had come to respect Adelaide's quiet strength. Adelaide wore a simple blue dress that Wyatt said made her eyes look like sapphires. Wyatt wore new clothes, his long hair neatly trimmed but still touching his shoulders, his beard freshly groomed. He looked magnificent, all muscle and masculine grace, and when Adelaide saw him waiting at the altar, her heart swelled with love. The preacher kept the ceremony brief, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt kissed Adelaide with such tender passion that several of the ladies in attendance sighed. They celebrated with a simple reception in the church hall, with food provided by grateful townspeople. It wasn't fancy, but it was genuine, and Adelaide felt truly welcomed for the first time since arriving in Superior. As the sun began to set, Wyatt and Adelaide rode back to their cabin in the mountains, now truly their home. Wyatt carried Adelaide over the threshold, careful of his still healing wound, and set her down gently in front of the fire he had already prepared. "Welcome home, Mrs. Bradford," he said, his pale blue eyes warm with love. "It sounds perfect when you say it," Adelaide said, reaching up to cup his face. "I never thought I could have this. A home, a husband, a future. Thank you for seeing me when no one else would. Thank you for being worth seeing," Wyatt said and kissed her again. That night they consummated their marriage with gentle passion, Wyatt mindful of his injury but determined to show Adelaide how much he loved her. And Adelaide, for the first time in her life, felt truly and completely cherished. The months that followed were the happiest of Adelaide's life. She settled into her new job at the stage office, proving to be excellent at organization and customer service. The townspeople gradually came to accept her fully, no longer seeing Jack Langford's daughter, but simply Adelaide Bradford, the stage office manager. Wyatt continued his trapping and hunting, but he also took on occasional jobs helping new settlers build cabins or guiding hunting parties into the mountains. Together, they made a good living, better than either had managed alone. Their cabin became a true home. Adelaide added curtains and rugs, planted a small garden that somehow thrived despite the altitude. Wyatt built on an additional room, anticipating the children they both wanted. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Adelaide reading aloud while Wyatt worked on tanning leather or carving. It was peaceful and perfect, everything Adelaide had dreamed of but never believed she could have. Winter came, bringing snow to the high country. Adelaide and Wyatt spent long evenings wrapped in each other's arms, telling stories and making plans. And on a particularly cold night in January, Adelaide told Wyatt the news she had been suspecting for weeks. "I'm pregnant," she said, watching his face carefully. "We're going to have a baby." Wyatt's expression transformed, joy and wonder, and a hint of fear all flickering across his features. "A baby," he repeated. "Adelaide, that's wonderful. Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor," Adelaide said. "But I know my body and I know the signs. By summer, you're going to be a father." Wyatt pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I promise you," he said fiercely, "our child will never know a day without love, never know what it's like to be judged for someone else's sins. We're going to give them the childhood we both deserved but never got." "I know we will," Adelaide said, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "I know we will." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Adelaide continued working through her first trimester, finally stepping back only when her growing belly made the daily ride to town uncomfortable. The townspeople, now fully accepting of her, brought gifts and offered advice. Mrs. Henderson even organized a quilting bee to make blankets for the baby. In late July, on a hot afternoon when the cicadas sang in the pines, Adelaide went into labor. Wyatt rode like the wind to fetch the doctor from Superior, then stayed by Adelaide's side through the long hours, holding her hand, wiping her brow, offering encouragement. Their son was born just after midnight, a healthy, loud baby boy with his father's pale blue eyes and his mother's determination. They named him William after Wyatt's own father's first name in the hope of reclaiming something good from painful pasts. "He's perfect," Wyatt said, cradling his son with a gentleness that belied his size and strength. "Thank you, Adelaide. Thank you for this gift, for this family, for this life." "Thank you," Adelaide replied, exhausted but happier than she had ever been, "for seeing me, for saving me, for loving me. Always," Wyatt promised, "for the rest of our lives and beyond." 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Margaret, named after Adelaide's mother. She had Adelaide's dark hair and quick smile, and she wrapped her father around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Wyatt and Adelaide raised their children with love and laughter, teaching them to be kind and strong and true to themselves. William grew into a sturdy boy who loved the mountains as much as his father did. Margaret was clever and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. Adelaide never forgot her father, but she also never let his legacy define her or her children. When William was old enough to ask about his grandfather, Adelaide told him the truth, that Jack Langford had made bad choices, but that those choices were his own and did not reflect on anyone else in the family. "You are not your grandfather," she told William firmly. "You are yourself, and you have the power to choose who you want to be. Never let anyone tell you differently." It was the same lesson Wyatt had taught her all those years ago in Superior, when he had looked at her and said those transformative words. She isn't her father. The years passed peacefully. Adelaide and Wyatt added 2 more children to their family, another boy, Thomas, and finally another girl, Sarah. They expanded to accommodate the growing family, with Wyatt building new rooms and Adelaide making each one a home. Superior grew and prospered as well. The copper mines proved rich and the town attracted more settlers. Adelaide's stage office became the social hub of the community, a place where people gathered to exchange news and gossip. She became known not as Jack Langford's daughter but as Adelaide Bradford, the woman who had exposed James Morton's criminal conspiracy and helped bring him to justice. Sometimes, visitors to Superior would learn the story and ask Adelaide about it. She would tell them the truth, that she had been judged unfairly, that she had been saved by a good man who saw her for who she truly was, and that she had fought to clear her name and claim her future. "The past doesn't have to define you," she would say. "You can choose to be more than your history, more than what others expect. You just have to be brave enough to try." Wyatt remained her rock, her protector, her partner in all things. He was a wonderful father, patient and strong, teaching their children to hunt and track and survive in the wilderness, while also emphasizing the importance of kindness and integrity. He was a devoted husband, still looking at Adelaide with the same love and wonder he had shown from the beginning. On their 10th anniversary, Wyatt took Adelaide back to the spot where he had first defended her from Sheriff Donovan, where he had spoken those words that changed her life. "I want you to know," he said, taking her hands in his, "that defending you that day was the best decision I ever made. You've given me a life beyond anything I ever imagined. A family, a home, a purpose. I love you more today than I did when we married, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." "I love you too," Adelaide said, tears of happiness in her eyes. "You saved me, not just from the mob that day, but from the prison of my father's legacy. You showed me I could be more than what people expected, that I deserved happiness and love. Thank you for that gift." They stood together in the dusty street of Superior, now prosperous and peaceful, and kissed as the sun set behind the mountains. And Adelaide knew, with absolute certainty, that she had finally found where she belonged. Years later, when Adelaide was a grandmother and Wyatt's hair had gone silver, they would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over the mountains they both loved. Their children had grown and married, giving them a house full of grandchildren who loved to visit the mountain cabin and hear stories of the old days. William had become a rancher, raising cattle in the valleys below the mountains. Margaret had married a teacher and lived in Superior, where she ran a school for the children of miners and settlers. Thomas had followed his father's path, becoming a trapper and guide, while Sarah had surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, the first female attorney in the territory. All of them were strong, confident people who knew their worth and refused to be defined by anyone else's expectations. Adelaide and Wyatt had raised them well, breaking the cycle of judgment and shame that had plagued their own childhoods. "Do you ever regret it?" Adelaide asked Wyatt one evening as they watched the stars emerge. "Taking a chance on me? Your life would have been simpler if you had just stayed out of it." "Never," Wyatt said firmly, pulling her close. "My life would have been emptier, lonelier, meaningless. You gave me purpose, Adelaide. You gave me love. You gave me a family and a reason to wake up grateful every morning. How could I ever regret that?" "I feel the same way," Adelaide said softly. "You were my salvation, my strength, my everything. I was lost when you found me, broken by the weight of my father's sins. And you looked at me and saw someone worth saving. That's a gift I can never repay." "You repay it every day," Wyatt said, "by being yourself, by loving me, by building this life with me. That's all I ever wanted." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the familiar stars wheel overhead. The desert night was cool and perfect, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant howl of coyotes. "What do you think Jack Langford would say if he could see us now?" Wyatt asked suddenly. Adelaide considered the question carefully. She had long since made peace with her father's memory, accepting both his love for her and his terrible choices. "I think," she said finally, "he would be proud, not of himself but of me, for breaking free from his legacy, for proving that his mistakes didn't have to be mine, for building something good and lasting out of the ruins he left behind. I think he'd be right to be proud," Wyatt said. "You're an amazing woman, Adelaide Bradford. You always have been." As they sat together on their porch, surrounded by the mountains they loved and the life they had built, Adelaide reflected on the long journey that had brought her here, from San Francisco to Superior, from shame to acceptance, from loneliness to love. It had been hard, painful, sometimes seemingly impossible. But she had persevered, and with Wyatt's help she had triumphed. She was not her father. She never had been. She was Adelaide Bradford, and that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The moon rose over the mountains, silver and bright, illuminating the cabin and the corral and the garden Adelaide had tended for so many years. It illuminated the life they had built together, the family they had created, the love that had sustained them through every challenge. "I love you," Adelaide said, the words as true and necessary as breathing. "I love you too," Wyatt replied, kissing her gently, "always and forever." And as they sat together under the stars, surrounded by mountains and memories and the life they had chosen, Adelaide Bradford knew she was finally, truly, completely home. The outlaw's daughter had found her redemption not through running or hiding, but through standing firm and claiming her right to be seen as herself. And the mountain man who had first recognized her worth had given her the greatest gift of all, the courage to believe in her own value. Their story, born from prejudice and pain, had bloomed into something beautiful and lasting. It was a testament to the power of seeing people for who they truly are, not who others expect them to be. It was a reminder that we are not defined by our parents' choices but by our own. It was a love story forged in the Wild West, where justice and mercy, strength and gentleness, pride and humility all found their balance. And it was, above all, proof that sometimes the most important words anyone can hear are simple, direct, and transformative. She isn't her father. She is herself. And that is more than enough.